Sound issue. We're going to get our sound fixed here real quick. Okay, I think we're ready to go this time. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this update on the coordinated efforts to end gun violence in our city. My name is Rich Chapman. I use he, him pronouns, and I'll be facilitating today's event. As you can see, we're all here in City Hall, back in what we hope to be is the first of many steps here to coming back to normal here in the city of Portland. We will have one presenter, actually all of the presenters that we have today will be visible through this screen. By now, I hope you've all been able to confirm that you've got recording privileges, all of our media partners. If not, please post a message in the chat and Shuli will get that taken care of for you. We have 5 speakers today. Their names with correct spelling and organization will be posted in the chat, and we'll be having a question and answer immediately following our presentation. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to our mayor, Ted Wheeler.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here today in person with many of my colleagues from around the area. As our city continues to endure gun violence at record levels, I want to make sure that the community is up to speed on the efforts to help fight this plague and how Portlanders can help. Today, you're going to hear updates from PAC-G, local, county, federal, and community partners who are working together to combat gun violence in Portland. I'd like to take a moment this morning to introduce a new member of my staff, Stephanie Howard, who recently joined my team as the new director for community safety. Stephanie has a strong background in public safety, recently serving as the deputy monitor in the office of the independent monitor for the city and county of Denver. And before that, she served as a tribal attorney with the office of the Colorado State Public Defender. We welcome Stephanie to the city of Portland and look forward to harnessing her expertise for community safety initiatives. For today's event, we will begin by hearing from Assistant Attorney, U.S. Attorney Craig Gabriel, who can explain how our federal partners are working with us to reduce gun violence in the city of Portland. After that, Assistant District Attorney Kirsten Snowden at the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office will provide an update on county efforts from a prosecution perspective. Next, we invite Portland Police Chief Chuck Lavelle and leadership from the Portland Police Bureau to address the work happening at the local law enforcement level and to discuss the results that we're seeing thus far. Finally, you're going to hear from Jamie Dogo and Lynn Tan from IRCO, which is the Immigrant Refugee Community Organization, who will share the intervention work being done by our community-based partners. And so to start, I'll turn this over to Rich, who will facilitate.
Okay, our first speaker will be Assistant U.S. Attorney Craig Gabriel.
Good morning. Again, my name is Craig Gabriel, and I'm the chief of the criminal division for the United States Attorney's Office here in Portland. U.S. Attorney Scott Ospog has a conflict this morning, and he does send his regards. I want to thank the mayor and everyone participating this morning. I also want to congratulate Stephanie Howard and tell her that we do look forward to working with her. Before I go any further, I offer my deepest condolences to the victims and family members who suffer from gun violence here in our community. I want to spend my time this morning highlighting 2 federal prosecutions that show the far-reaching trauma of firearms and gun violence. The first case involves sex trafficking of minors by force and coercion. Just last Friday, on March 11th, after a week-long trial, a federal jury here in Portland found a defendant named John L. Jackson guilty of multiple counts of sex trafficking of 2 teenage girls. Jackson trafficked the girls in Portland and in Southwest Washington. He drugged them, he sexually abused them, and he sold them to other men for sex. Throughout this horrific abuse, Jackson would brandish a firearm to intimidate and control the victims. Jackson is in the custody of the United States Marshal Service, and now that he has been found guilty by a jury, he faces a long prison term. This case is an example of how firearms are used to threaten and intimidate vulnerable victims and facilitate sex trafficking of minors here in our own community. This case was investigated jointly by the FBI and the Portland Police Bureau. The second case I want to announce is very recent, and it's being made public here for the first time. This case highlights how gun crime is a regional issue extending beyond the city of Portland. 2 days ago, on March 15th, ATF agents and the Salem Police Department served a search warrant at a house in Salem. During the search warrant, law enforcement seized 63 firearms in a single home. The defendant in this case is Tyler Harnden. Harnden is alleged to be part of a massive ghost gun manufacturing operation here in Oregon. Harnden is also a convicted felon and prohibited from possessing firearms. Further, Harnden is accused of distributing fentanyl in exchange for receiving more firearms. This is a wide-ranging and ongoing investigation, so I cannot say more about it now, but the investigation does show that illegal firearms and the violence that goes with them are problems that we have to address together with federal, local, and regional law enforcement partners. In conclusion, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, community safety is our highest priority. That includes preventing and prosecuting gun violence. The Jackson and Harnden cases that I've highlighted today are 2 examples of our commitment to working collaboratively with our partners, including Stephanie, to reduce violent crime and keep people safe. Thank you.
And our next speaker will be Assistant District Attorney Kirsten Snowden from the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office.
Good morning. I'm Chief Deputy District Attorney Kirsten Snowden. I'd like to begin by thanking the Mayor's Office for bringing us all together to continue to shed light on what is now simply a public health crisis in our community. I'd also like to begin by saying directly to those in our community who have suffered losses and trauma from gun violence, how sorry we are. We respond, members of our office respond to each of the homicides that occur on our streets alongside the police, and our victim advocates meet with families very early on to explain the process. It can be very traumatic, the process, in addition to the incredible loss of life that we are experiencing. Like the U.S. Attorney's Office, our office's #1 priority is gun violence. And I can tell you that, unfortunately, our gun violence referrals are up over 450%. We have been working alongside our law enforcement partners, including the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Portland Police Bureau, as part of the Portland Area Crime Gun Initiative. We staff cases weekly to talk about investigative leads, where the best place is jurisdictionally to prosecute a case, whether that's in federal court or in state court. And unfortunately, I can say that we're becoming overwhelmed. As many of you have read in the papers recently, our criminal justice system is simply in crisis. We have criminal defense attorneys who are unable to accept new cases due to crushing workloads. And we in the DA's office are not immune from that as well. We have reallocated the resources that we have to focus on gun violence. And I can say that unfortunately, just this week alone, we initiated the prosecution in 3 separate cases where different people had been shot in the face. This is our #1 priority, but we can't do it without the adequate resources that we need to prosecute all of the cases that come to our office, gun violence, property crimes, and others. Unfortunately, due to the crushing caseloads, we've lost over 150 years of prosecutorial experience in the last year alone. I'd like to illustrate the significance of this with a couple of quotes from folks who have recently left our office. One woman who worked as a deputy district attorney for 10 years and left less than a week ago said, historically, trial unit DDAs have heavy workloads. But in the past 2 years, the significant rise in homicides and violent felonies combined with the backlog of cases led to unsustainable workloads. Sexual assault cases were the majority of my caseload, and work frequently spilled over into evenings, weekends, and even vacation time. Exhaustion and burnout make it impossible to give our best to vulnerable victims. Another male DDA who worked in our office for 20 years who recently left said, the feeling in the office at the time I left was that dedicated, public service-minded people were being ground into the dirt under the crushing weight of exploding workloads caused by staffing reductions. There were approximately 100 deputy district attorneys when I started, and 20 years later, there are barely 75, even though the population of Multnomah County has increased over 20% during this time. It's just not sustainable. I want to make the public aware of this crisis, but know that with the resources we have, we are focused on the most violent offenders. We are doing everything in our power with the tools available to us to keep these offenders in custody and to seek the longest possible sentences under the law for the most dangerous in our community. In 2022, we are on pace to set a new record for the number of gun violence cases that we've issued. Despite our challenges, we will always continue to fight for the victims and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Next up, we have Police Chief Chuck Lavelle.
Thank you, Rich. I want to start this morning by joining my colleagues in their acknowledgement of the victims and the families who are feeling the brunt of the gun violence. I think it's very important that we keep them at the forefront of this work that we're doing. I also do want to open with a thank you to the media, not only for being here today, but for helping us appeal to those who took evidence from the scene at a shooting near Normandale Park. Since our request for help, one of the several pieces of evidence has been returned. So thank you for putting out this message, and thank you to the person who returned it. However, unfortunately, there are still some more pieces of evidence we are looking to have turned in and witnesses we would still like to talk to. So we ask that you now continue to spread this message. I want to talk first about homicides. We're already at 20 homicides for this year, 19 of which are gunshot victims. Our homicide detectives are very committed to their cases. I know this can be frustrating sometimes for the media and for the public. We're all attuned to social media and the speed at which news travels, but homicide investigators are thinking on a different level. They're completely committed to their victims and the victims' loved ones. Our investigators are focused on protecting the integrity of the case, which means ensuring witnesses or suspects don't know the information detectives may know. Following up on every lead and seeking every bit of information they can. It's a difficult balance between providing public information and protecting the case to its end. We can make that arrest and have a good prosecutable case. We've made several arrests recently. Detectives arrested the suspect involved in the Dawson Park homicide of Mark Johnson, as well as the killer of Jacob Dreyer. They also arrested the suspect for the death of James Wise in Old Town. I'm continually proud of our detectives and the work they do. They get called out at all hours of the night to investigate the most heinous crimes, and they remain dedicated to those victims and fighting for their families and finding their killers. To say thank you doesn't seem like enough, but I do want to recognize their efforts today. Now we'll transition to shootings. For 2022, we're averaging 21.9 shootings per week. Currently, that is just under 650 shootings for the year. If this trend continues, we'll end the year with just over 1,500 shootings, which would be a 14% increase over last year and a 266% increase over 2019. So that's why we're here today, because we're committed to stopping and reducing this trend. The Focus Intervention Team, or FIT, I have some members of that team here with me today. They've been operational for approximately 2 months. FIT has responded to many shootings, patrolled hotspot areas, followed up on investigative leads, and located and arrested individuals involved in gun violence. FIT has recovered approximately 19 firearms in their first 2 months and have arrested 32 individuals for various crimes. The crimes include gun possession crimes, aggravated assault, robbery-related crimes such as carjacking, as well as traffic-related crimes such as reckless driving and DUI. Several subjects have also been arrested on outstanding warrants. On a few occasions, FIT has been able to apprehend attempted murder suspects immediately following a shooting. This work is not just the Focus Intervention Team, but also in coordination with precinct officers, K-9, air support, and sometimes our special emergency reaction team. FIT also is committed to meaningful community engagement, relationship building activities, such as recently spending time with the family and their kids related to a recent homicide. The members of our Enhanced Community Safety Team, or ECST, continue to work to investigate these gun crimes and use the technology available to link casings and seize weapons with other crimes. We continue to work with our area partners and youth violence prevention, as we know this is really going to take a collaborative effort to reduce gun violence in our community. And finally, I opened with an appeal and I'll close with an appeal. For every shooting, for every homicide, there are most likely people who have information that can help solve these cases. We want to do everything we can to try to bring at least the beginning stages of closure to those affected by gun violence. We need people's help to do so. We have Crime Stoppers where people can remain anonymous, and we ask you to just give us that vital information. And also, before I close, want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who's working hard in our community to end gun violence. We can't do this work alone. It takes a lot of people doing a heavy lift and working together. So thank you to everyone who's taking part in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next up, we have Jimmy Dogo from the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization. Oh, and we actually have two speakers. It'll be Jimmy and Lynn from IRCO. Thank you, guys.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here, and thank you, Mayor's Office, for including us, IRCO, as part of this conference. I'm Lynn Tan from the Director of Youth Services at IRCO, and Jimmy Dogo, Director of our Africa House Services. And we're here to speak about our experience as a community-based organization and how we support all these entities up here. So, as a community-based organization, we work with the Mayor's Office. We work with the Office of Violence Prevention in the City of Portland. We have partnerships. Chief Lavelle just talked about the FIT team, and IRCO has members participating as an advisory in an advisory capacity with Multnomah County. We've also got services and partnerships, and we also partner and consult with our law enforcement, and broader correctional systems as the youth and families that IRCO works with. So our immigrant, our refugee communities, our Asian, Pacific Islander, and African immigrant communities, and how we can support, because sometimes these communities are set up, and they're new. However, intersecting with all these entities as we know it, that's a little bit of a disconnect. Culturally specific, culturally responsive practices, and how to actually prevent and provide the intervention services for the youth involved in these systems. So today, I would just set this up to say that IRCO is in this position where we partner. We're here to support our immigrant and refugee communities, to partner with all these entities and our school systems to provide a myriad of services. So I'll just give you a setup, and then my colleague here, Jimmy, would share a story, and if time permits, we could share additional stories. So in the prevention and early intervention realm, so we're talking about working with youth as young as 13, 14 into your high school ages. We connect with them through referrals from schools and school systems. We hear about, there's been all this information presented about the shootings, the homicides, the trafficking. We are very much aware of all of that. But it's a matter of working and addressing those, or creating services, your prevention services working upstream. So this is why we work with the schools to have prevention services, connecting with referrals, starting there, creating pro-social activities. Guess what? Because right now, you already have lots of fights happening in schools, and we've been getting calls left and right from the schools. Hey, help us, we've got an African youth here. We don't know how to connect with the youth of the family, or Pacific Islander youth there. Help us. So we're in the schools, working with the schools, working with our colleagues here and institutions to provide prevention services, pro-social groups, after-school activities, working with Multnomah County to participate and partner in their after-school, their SUN service system to provide groups. We offer sports, recreational, wellness activities, open gyms, native literacy classes, dance, things that these youth and the families crave for, but maybe there's a disconnect after they've settled here. And therefore, there's also the opportunities for them to get into antisocial behavior, for lack of a better way to put it. And then finally, we also do life skills workshops, and we have resource fairs, working with also our other community-based organizations to partner. This work cannot be done alone. And in the summer, we also pilot and participate in summer youth employment opportunities. As far as the outreach and the wraparound services for the specific cases where now, like there's a conviction or there's a shooting, I'll pass it to Jimmy to share a little bit about some of those stories.
Again, thank you, Lynn, and thank you, the mayor and the mayor office and all the law enforcement, especially Portland Police Bureau that is helping us in our community. Again, my name is Jimmy Dogo. I am the Associate Director of IRCO and Director of Africa House. So additional to what my colleague Lynn just said, I want to also to add that we provide support to communities, especially the victim of gun violence, by helping them relocate from their apartment, or when they're scared to going back to their apartment. So we help them relocate to the new place, or in some cases, we even help them move completely out of the area. And we, unfortunately, every morning we wake up and there is a case of shooting or gun violence in our community, especially the African refugee community. And right now, we're dealing with two recent cases. One homicide happened in February 20, and one shooting just happened last Tuesday on Powell and 92nd. So we've been trying our best to provide services to the family. What we do is we help, for the homicide case, we still are helping the family with relocation with fundraising for burial. We also behind the scene working with legislators, with our senators to help, a family member who want to come and be at the funeral for their daughter, for their sisters, and all those. So we are behind the scene. We do community comprehensive, services where we connect family to resources. We connect victim or survivor to culturally specific high skill mental health services so that they can access those resources. We also work to make sure that the victim rent are paid, utility are paid, and also help after they recover, help them with employment services. So again, we work closely with the CD Office of Gang Violence Reduction to provide all these resources to the family in need. So again, thank you so much for inviting us. And also, I want to take this opportunity to thank the law enforcement for working closely with our community in order to reduce those gang violence in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jimmy and Lynn, and thank you for the work you do. And we'll now introduce Mayor Ted Wheeler.
Thank you, and thanks to all my colleagues who are standing with me here today, and thanks for members of the media giving voice to our presentation. I also want to extend my sincere condolences to everybody who has been impacted by gun violence and homicides in our community, particularly the family and the loved ones of people who have been lost. Community safety continues to be a top priority for my administration. We continue to focus our efforts to recruit new police officers and retain the best officers we have now. And I was privileged just this morning to attend a ceremony where we welcomed new officers and new public safety support specialists into the Portland Police Bureau, along with analysts, investigators, and officers being promoted to higher ranks within the Portland Police Bureau. We're also continually exploring opportunities to create new community partnerships and expand those that are already in place, as outlined by some of my colleagues this morning. Through these partnerships, law enforcement was able to investigate and arrest a suspect in the deadly shooting at Dawson Park. And that was a shooting that I personally visited amongst many others over the course of the last several years. And I'm glad to see that the wheels of justice are turning in that case. That suspect was also involved in other shootings in Portland and could have hurt others before he was removed from our streets. So I'm glad that he has been. As you've heard, the PAC-G partnership is showing progress, hard-won progress at that, progress that needs your help and your support in order to make a real difference in our community. I want to thank the great work of the focused intervention team that does its work with the direct involvement of FIT's Citizen Oversight Group, sometimes called the FITCOG. I want to thank Chair Pastor Ed and Vice Chair Kimberly Dixon for the ongoing leadership to help address gun violence using a new community-led policing model that, as the chief indicated, is showing early signs of success. You've already heard the early work of the FIT, but it's worth repeating because it shows that police reform is working and that if we had more funds for more officers and more PS3s, we could do even more to bring public safety to more Portlanders using a community-led community policing model. FIT launched its first patrols on January 19th. And in those 2 short months, FIT has made over 80 arrests, seized 25 guns, responded to over 500 calls for service, including the tragic incidents at Normandale and Dawson Parks. FIT is also working to strengthen relationships between law enforcement and the community at large. FIT officers are attending community events and spending time with the families of gun violence victims. Officers from FIT attend weekly meetings with the Citizen Oversight Committee and members of the public to ensure real-time transparency and accountability in their work. Importantly, FIT officers aren't just responding to violence. They're working to prevent violence from happening in the first place. FIT officers work to connect community members who are at risk with community-based organizations who can provide services to those community members before violence occurs. The Office of Violence Prevention continues to do their work connecting community-based organizations with the resources they need to provide their critically important services. Last month, OVP was able to allocate the fourth phase of our April 2021 gun violence reduction ordinance funding. From this allocation, we were able to support 5 new and emerging community-based organizations to expand their operations in Portland and to address the violence that we're seeing in our city today. Through OVP, we've been able to partner with community-based organizations to do prevention, intervention, and follow-up work. In the prevention lane, we have the Violence Interruption Program that includes our street-level outreach workers. In the intervention and follow-up phase, we have the Intensive Case Management Program that provides intensive case managers as well as life coaches to high-risk individuals. These investments in the community are a critical piece of addressing gun violence. But standing alone, none of these efforts are sufficient in and of themselves. Gun violence knows no boundaries. Therefore, we see the ongoing need for commitment, for coordination, collaboration, and investments across all jurisdictions at all levels of government. We need to come together as a community and show that we will not tolerate this brutality. We need to come together to break these crippling cycles of violence. And we need to come together as a community to support the mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and children whose lives are forever changed by these senseless acts of violence that we're seeing unfold on our streets. Justice demands courage in our actions, not just words. As outlined by my colleagues, there are many ways to help bring justice to these families while also ensuring the safety of those who choose to come forward. There are resources available to protect people from retaliation. Even anonymous information will help us to put an end to this horrific violence. So I'm asking my fellow Portlanders who may be able to help bring justice and healing to our community to show courage, to speak out. With courage, we can close this chapter in our city's history. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Now we'll transition to our question and answer phase. And before we do that, though, I'd like to introduce a couple of our officers from PPB that came specifically to answer questions from the Focused Intervention Team. And that's Lieutenant Dulio. We have Chris Baton and Spencer Parrott. Thank you guys for coming. So what we'll do now is, like we've done before, if you guys have questions, please use the raise your hand feature and I will call on you. We ask that you limit to one question per turn, and we'll be actually capturing everybody for their first question before we go to that second turn with people. Please remember to continue your mute discipline. And with that, we'll call on Liz Birch for the first question.
Thank you for your time today. My question is for Mayor Wheeler. The city started addressing this spike in homicides and shootings last year, but this year things are actually getting worse. So is what the city's doing not working, and what needs to change?
Thank you for the question, Liz. And we're, of course, all waiting to see the turnaround. And obviously, the sooner we can support programs like the Focused Intervention Team, the new Enhanced Community Safety Team, which provides investigative follow-up to each of our shootings, the sooner that we can continue to invest in community-based organizations that provide the intervention and prevention and follow-up services to help strengthen families and community. And the sooner that we can collaborate more effectively with our federal partners and our other local partners to help collectively address these issues by both sharing investigative information as well as ensuring that there is justice served in each and every one of these shooting cases, the sooner we'll start to see that tide turn. I believe we have the right programs in place. I'm determined to see gun violence be reduced in our community. And obviously that would happen much faster if we had more officers, if we had more PS3s, if we had more community-based policing. And that's why I am committed to continuing to advocate not only for the tools, the resources, and training that our police bureau needs to be effective, but also for the personnel required to have them be able to do their job both effectively as well as safely. And the collaborations you heard today, the PAC-G, it's already making a big difference in terms of our ability to work together as law enforcement. And you heard from some of our community partners who are working with us at the family level. We're going to continue to strengthen those solutions. No one solution is going to solve this problem. It will take a myriad of solutions because it's a complex problem, but I believe we are making the right investments at the right time for the right interventions to get the results we ultimately want. Thank you.
It looks like Kendra Kent, do you have the next question? If you wouldn't mind just mentioning your name, organization, and who your question is directed to.
Sure. My name is Kendra Kent. I'm with KPTV Fox 12, and my question is for Chief Lavelle. I want to know if you can just elaborate a little bit more on what some of the challenges are in making arrests in some of these cases. What are your clearance rates for homicides? I know you mentioned when you were speaking earlier that you've made several arrests, and then we've talked about 20 homicides this year. So what are the clearance rates, and how does that compare to other, cities across the US of similar size? And I don't know if you can just elaborate on that.
Yeah, thank you, Kendra. I can talk a little bit about that. The clearance rates are a little tricky because they fluctuate. You could have a homicide and then it takes some time to investigate it, and that could be cleared at some point down the road. So those numbers are always kind of fluctuating. I would say some of the challenges are, one, the volume. We're a city that used to have 10 homicide investigators. Now we're closer to 20, and probably in the next month or two, we're going to add additional, which will bring us to the mid-20s-ish in people investigating homicides. And that doesn't include the shootings. We have ECST investigating the non-homicide shootings as well. So that gives you some idea of the volume of the problem. I think some of it is just getting the information from the public. We try to do a lot of outreach asking the public to please come forward and share information and help us solve these cases, help us to end this gun violence in the community. And I think from a systemic approach too, I look at the public safety system in our community for everything from BOEC, when people make a call to 911, all the way through the police, the county, the jail system, parole and probation, the courts, public defender's office, all the way through. Our system has a lot of challenges, staffing and resources, things that we're trying to address so we can have an efficient, healthy system from start to finish. And I think some of that has really been impacted by the pandemic and really the rise in gun violence that we've seen as well.
Thanks, Chief. Looks like our next question is going to be from Jonathan Levins.
Hi, Jonathan Levinson, OPB. This question is for, I don't know, the mayor or the chief, can probably either one. You mentioned that the focus intervention team had made a bunch of arrests, many of them not related to gun violence, things like DUIs. When FIT was announced, the public was told that they would be different from the gun violence reduction team, that they wouldn't focus focused exclusively on gun violence and wouldn't be stopping people without pretext. Is that no longer the case?
The chief asked me to answer this. So their focus is gun violence. In that work, the traffic stops they do are based on crimes or reasonable suspicion. In addition to gun violence, right, they are Portland police officers first and foremost. And we've had one of the worst years in traffic fatalities that Portland's ever seen. So you have kind of this worst year in homicides, worst year in traffic fatalities. And so it's incumbent upon any officer in the city to try to increase traffic safety also. So the FIT officers in their work, if they see a individual swerving all over the road, indications and signs that they might be intoxicated, it would not be the right thing for them to turn and say, hey, I just do gun violence. I don't do that. And then that person crashes and kills a family. So that's where some of those traffic stops come from. Reckless driving. If you have someone that blows a red light going 90 miles an hour, we expect our officers to do what any Portland police officer would do and make those stops. But their focus is first and foremost gun violence. Lieutenant Kenneth Dulio, DUILIO.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lieutenant. Maxine, you're up next.
Thank you, appreciate it. My question is for the mayor and the chief and also Kirsten. It's the subject is really retention and filling vacancies. I heard the mayor mention we need more officers, more PS3s and community safety specialists. The city budget office recommended against adding additional money because analysts noted that the Bureau has money and has vacancies that haven't been filled. So my question is, what is being done to fill those vacancies? What's needed? And for the DA's office, how many prosecutors left in the last year? You mentioned 150 hours or years of institutional knowledge that went out the door. So I just wondered how many prosecutors. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you for the question, Maxine. And I'll start, then I'll turn it over to the chief, and then I'll turn it over to our district attorney's office for their response. Portland has a critical shortage of law enforcement personnel right now. We are at a 28-year low on a per capita basis. And no matter how you slice it, the fact of the matter is response time is inadequate. Follow-up time is too long. Until this point, we haven't had the kind of concentrated resources around the intervention and prevention of gun violence in our community that we've needed in recent months. And we're turning the tide on that. I'm not prepared at this point to reduce capacity in the Portland Police Bureau until we have made a good faith effort to fill those positions. And only recently did we start to fund the recruiting function in the Portland Police Bureau to start stepping that up again. I'll turn it over to Chief Lavelle for follow-up. I also just want to acknowledge the pitch made by the district attorney's office on behalf of district attorneys, as well as public defenders. This is all part of a system. And even if we had all the resources we need at the local level, which we don't, but even if we did, unless the rest of the system is also adequately staffed up and well coordinated with the work that we're doing, it's not going to be a successful system. So one of the things I'm seeing signs of hope around is our willingness now to work together and collaborate, think about this as a system rather than just a bunch of individual initiatives, because it's not just one or the other. It's got to be all of the above. Chief.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Max. One, I think it's a difficult time for everyone in law enforcement and in a lot of professions to hire people. In 2020, when we took a budget cut, we did everything we could to not lay off people. But the the handful of people we did lay off were from our personnel division, and they were our background investigators, because we knew we didn't have the money to bring on additional folks at that time. So just today, we hired an additional 7 background investigators, because now we have to re-engage that machine to hire people and bring people on. And I think, we're doing that in just a challenging time for everyone to hire, find people that want to come out and work and do police work today. And I'm happy today. I was really encouraged. We hired 2 police officers today, 3 public safety support specialists. We had a full room at the Justice Center today of people we were promoting and who are coming into the profession. So I think it's just a challenging time in many ways, but we are committed to hiring folks. We've got these additional backgrounders that will help us get people through the process quicker. And I'm certain that in time, we'll be able to get back to where we need to be staffing wise.
So thank you, Maxine. Like the Police Bureau, we're just struggling to fill the vacancies that we have. We're currently in talks with the county who funds our office about our staffing crisis. There are other jurisdictions that are the size of Portland that have twice as many prosecutors as our office does. And I think what's happened is just a confluence of factors that have contributed to the situation that we're in now. With COVID, the courts essentially shut down for a better part of a year and a half with very few trials going out. Because also of the pandemic, the jails were releasing a disproportionate number of folks to the street to try and curb the spread of the virus in custody, for in custody folks. And, the loss that we've suffered, you asked how many people. I don't have that exact number. It's about 12 to 15 DAs that we've lost in the past year. And that's just unprecedented, especially some really senior deputy district attorneys. And while we're hiring as fast as we can, most of the folks we're hiring to replace those people are new. They don't have prosecutorial experience. And while they're dedicated and they're eager to learn, you just cannot replace that experience that's been lost. So we're reaching out to other district attorneys' offices to see if there are folks that want to move to Portland, but we're in a difficult situation. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Kirsten. And Craig, did you want to?
Nothing on resources.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Maxine. And Kyle, you're next.
Thanks so much. Kyle Avoshi with KGW Channel 8. You hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you great.
Good. Thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you all in person, hopefully soon. I wanted to drill down on the issue of personnel a little bit more. A couple questions either for the mayor or the chief. One, can you update the status of the retire rehire program or efforts to have retired officers return to the force? Where does that stand now, and what is kind of your expectation going forward? And then secondarily, it's been reported that a large wave of police retirements may be coming this summer, upwards of maybe 80 officers eligible for retirement. Wondering how you plan to retain those officers or offset the losses.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Kyle. It's Chief Lavelle. Right now, I would tell you we're looking at significant retirements potentially this July. We don't know for sure how many people will retire, but it's one of those windows where we expect to see. I'm not sure if it's 80. It might be a number smaller than that, but not much smaller than that. And what we're trying to do is offer retire rehire to those folks. The initial focus on retire rehire was to try to bring some people back from the last year and a half, and that was always kind of a tough stretch. I think people, when they leave and retire and move on to other things, it's very difficult to lure them back into the job. So I think I'm more hopeful for this July to be able to pull some people back with our retire rehire program. And also we have a new contract now with the Portland Police Association. So I think that'll be helpful. It gives people at least the ability to kind of forecast out a little bit with the contract. But it's definitely a challenging time in law enforcement. There's throughout this state, throughout the local area, and throughout the country, people are really looking to fill their vacancies. So there's a lot of competition as well. We're standing right now at about 780 sworn officers, which is historically low, the lowest I've seen in my career.
Do you mind if I follow up on that really quickly? I apologize.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Would you ever consider lateral rehire retires? And then secondarily, the money that's been allocated for that program, what happens if you're not able to find enough interested parties?
Yeah, we do consider laterals. We do bring on laterals. Typically, a lot of people in the state looking for laterals too, particularly with DPSST down in Salem, the Department of Public Safety, Safety Standards and Training. They've had their struggles with COVID throughout the pandemic as well. That forced them to close down some classes, which kind of extends what's already about an 18-month for us process to get people off of probation and able to work. So laterals are in high demand in Oregon and in a lot of places. And we do look for laterals. Any money that we have that's designated for rehire, if we don't use that money, I think what will happen is we will return it to the city. But we're looking to have this July rehire period be more robust than our previous effort.
All right, Rosemary, looks like you're next.
I'm Rosemary Reynolds with KXL Radio. My question's for the chief and also for the mayor. Kyle kind of addressed this. $500,000 was spent on the rehire effort for police. Not being able to get them to come back, what does that say to you about the police bureau and the mayor's office? And with not one single one coming back, isn't that frustrating?
Thank you for the question. I think it says a couple of things. First of all, it says that people who we were targeting to come back, they weren't ready to come back. And I suspect part of the reason is they're in a wait and see pattern. They want to know whether or not, if they come back to the Portland Police Bureau, will there be a difference? In other words, will they have the support of the mayor, which they do? Will they have the support of the city council? And I believe the tide has turned on our city council. I believe we have demonstrated a commitment to tools, resources, training, and personnel in the Portland Police Bureau, particularly in recent months. And I'm very appreciative of that. They need to know that they're going to be supported by the community at large. And as the chief had indicated, this is a very challenging time to be a police officer in America. You're not just signing up for protection of the community and law and order, but you are also asked to intervene on all of these new social issues around mental health, around substance abuse, around record gun violence in our community. A lot of it, which is gang related, a lot is domestic violence related, a lot of it is just that there are some cultural issues around the way people resolve conflict in our community and in our country. And so I understand the reluctance of people to want to step forward. But what I hope happens is that through the actions that we have taken in the Portland Police Bureau over the course of the last year that demonstrate that we are serious about the Portland Police Bureau not being dragged along towards change and accountability, but leading the way and showing police agencies across America what an innovative, evolving police bureau can be, that has tools, resources, training, and personnel in place to be successful, that has specific focused interventions like the FIT or the enhanced community safety team or some of the investigative work that's being done, the new partnerships that we're developing like the PAC-G with our federal and our other local partners. I want people to believe when they come into the police bureau that they are coming into an innovative leading agency. It's going to take time. And as the chief indicated, we really didn't know whether there would be a lot of interest in rehire. The early indications are that there is not interest, which means we have work to do. And I'm, as the mayor and police commissioner, committed to doing that work. I think the chief is. So am I frustrated? No, that's not the right emotion that I feel. I think the emotion I feel is I'm ready to fight to make this work. And if it's not retire, rehire, then it's going to be something else. The recruiting we're doing around officers, the recruiting we're doing around the PS3s, the work we're doing to strengthen community-based organizations, the work we're doing to deflect a lot of the calls that currently come to the Portland Police Bureau to other interventions like the Portland street response, the work we're doing to invest in a new 911 system that's enhanced. So not everything comes to the police bureau, but goes to other first responder agencies that might be better able to serve. That will reduce some of the pressure that's currently on our officers to run from call to call to call and make this a job where our officers have that opportunity and the necessity of going into the community and participating again in neighborhood association meetings, and business district association meetings, and community-based organization meetings, and rebuilding that trust that is so necessary to have between the police bureau and the people we serve. So am I frustrated? No. It was one of many strategies that we're pursuing, and at this point, it hasn't worked the way we would have hoped. But that's not the only game in town. There's other strategies that we'll continue to fight to support.
And this is Chief Lavelle. I'd like to follow up just a little on that too. The retire rehire, when it was originally conceived, was really to let someone retire, but then continue immediately in a role at the police bureau. Initially, it was never really designed to bring people back who would be gone for a period of time. And we're in a time right now where people who are ready to leave or ready to move on to the next chapter of life. We hired a lot of cops in the 90s who are retirement eligible and they want to enjoy their retirement. And then we've had some folks who have left and wanted to continue their law enforcement career, and they've gone other places and done that. This is a time right now where being a police officer, you're in high demand throughout the local area, throughout the state, throughout the country. We've had people who have moved on to other jobs. So the look back part of it that we did initially was, it was the program was never really designed for that. But like the mayor said, we wanted to be innovative and try to get even one or two people back with these different approaches. And for the look back part, retire rehire was one thing we tried.
Have you totally given up on that, Chief?
I haven't totally given up on it. I believe our personnel division is still talking to one or two people, but we do have another go at it for July, which I think will be much more fruitful.
Thanks, Chief. Just to let you guys know, we're about at a 5-minute warning here, and the mayor's got another engagement he needs to attend. So next, we're going to go with Wright Gasaway. Oh, okay. Genevieve, looks like you're up.
Hey, thanks for taking our questions and thanks for the update today. I have a question for Mayor Wheeler. Mayor Wheeler, the question that I have for you is, we've seen this call from the community to declare this an emergency. It's something that you've done with the homeless crisis. Why not do the same with gun violence?
So the call was made in a press conference last week. We've reached out to those individuals. I look forward to meeting with them, picking their brains, hearing their thoughts, and we'll see what we can do with it.
Do you foresee yourself declaring this an emergency? Is it anything that interests you?
It's certainly worth looking at. The point of calling for an emergency, that's actually a legal definition here at the City of Portland. It gives me authority as mayor to consolidate bureau functions. And I believe there probably are some opportunities for us to work more collaboratively. But I'd actually like to hear from the community-based group that put that charge before us in terms of what specifically they were thinking. So I'm looking forward to meeting with them. I am ready to embrace the main body of their work as I understood it. Having listened to the press conference, it seemed like we're in alignment on a great deal. So I look forward to meeting with them and hearing specifically what they had in mind.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. And thank you, Genevieve. Alex, you're next.
Hi, yeah, this is Alex Walensky with the Portland Mercury. I have a question that kind of piggybacks on what Jonathan was asking about earlier, questions for the chief. Last summer, you announced that you'd be recommending to officers to not pull drivers over for nonviolent, low-level infractions. And it sounds like that still might be a tool that the FIT team and other officer teams are using to apprehend suspected shooters or car thefts or other issues. Can you explain how that earlier mission to cut back on non-critical traffic stops influences the way that you're investigating gun crimes?
Sure. This is Chief Lavelle again. So with the work of the FIT, they're out there doing gun violence work specifically. But during the course of that work, they're going to come across people who have warrants, who are DUII, who are driving recklessly. And the expectation is they're going to take action as a Portland police officer to rectify those situations and to keep the community safe. When I last summer talked to my folks and told them we wanted to focus on the more serious and safety-related traffic stops, it was in part due to the reason we had so many traffic fatalities and so many crashes in the city. We'd moved our traffic division to patrol to help out with call taking. And with a very limited resource, it made sense to focus less on the smaller, maybe administrative type, non-safety related stops and try to move those off the plate and focus on the safety specific things. But that doesn't mean that officers cannot make those stops or shouldn't. We still need people driving safely. But it was really my intent to just focus our resources on the things that were more likely contributing to the crashes and the fatalities on the road.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks, Alex. Tess, you're up next.
Thanks. This is Tess Risky from Willamette Week. My question is for Mayor Wheeler and Chief Lavelle. I'm wondering if both of you could please articulate your understanding of the root causes that are perpetuating this cycle of gun violence in Portland.
All right, so I'm going to be careful here, Tess, because I am not a social scientist, but I'm going to give you my best belief at this point. First of all, I think there are some overarching societal reasons for this. First of all, there is a trend in America where if we see a conflict, we take out a gun and we shoot at it. We are not very good as a society at resolving conflict in a de-escalated, peaceful manner. That's clearly a piece of this. Other societal issues relate to a sense on the part of many in our community and in our nation that they don't have either economic or educational opportunities. There's a lot of frustration and anger out there related to a lack of family security and a sense of hopelessness towards the future. I am told that definitely plays a key role. And then just at a pragmatic level in our community, we obviously are awash in guns, drugs, there's gang violence, and perhaps more than anything else, we're seeing a retaliatory nature to the shootings in our community. One shooting begets another shooting, begets another shooting. And so that's, given all these complex issues, that's why there are so many interventions and preventative steps and law enforcement and community-based interventions that need to take place. On the law enforcement side, it's the focused intervention team, it's the investigative capacity, it's working well with our partners at the district attorney's office, with the courts, with the county sheriff, with our federal law enforcement partners. As you heard this morning, it's also about strengthening community, strengthening families, and reaching out to and giving those who are impacted or might be engaged in gun violence to engage in other opportunities around education, around economic achievement. All of these things are important, and that's why we're here today as a rather diverse grouping to say no one intervention is going to solve the problem. We have to focus on this really complex issue of gun violence from a multitude of fronts and think of it as a comprehensive battle against homicide and gun violence in our community. And that's the way we are approaching it.
Thanks, Mayor. And right, it looks like you're probably going to be our last question. We've got up there still, but right, go ahead.
Yeah, Wright Gazwa with K2. My question is for the mayor. Mayor, many cities in America saw violence trend up during the pandemic. The violence has trended down in many other cities. Why has Portland not been able to get the violence under control? And are you talking with counterparts in cities that have seen violence come back down about what they're doing?
We are in communication with many others. We look at the practices being used by other communities. We're determined to bring down the incidence of gun violence and homicides in our community. The strategies that we have selected, we believe, are the right ones to make the biggest difference as quickly as possible.
Thanks. Yeah, it is. Yeah, David, looks like you're left there and we can't leave our old friend out. What's your question, David?
There we go. I've heard so much about community-based intervention programs that are being funded by the city to help reduce gun violence. I can't really find a list of them, which organizations are doing this and what they're doing. Is there some way that we can find that to let our readers know exactly what those programs are?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. I believe OVP is where I want to direct. Yeah, I'll tell you what, David, we're going to post something in the chat for you as a resource there. Otherwise, the Office of Violence Prevention, I believe, is going to be our source of information. So with that, we really appreciate you, David, and your question and all the questions today. Appreciate all the presenters that came and joined us for this really important subject matter, and we'll close out. Thank you.